Dallas County detectives are investigating the death of a mother and her little boy. Seagoville police found Lyric Bacchus and her 7-year-old son Deuce dead in the garage last week. Home surveillance cameras captured the chaos. Deuce was a first grader in Seagoville. Bacchus was a social media influencer. She had a clothing boutique and tens of thousands of followers. Family believes the pair died from carbon monoxide poisoning. Police are waiting on autopsies before confirming.
It was February 9th, 2024, in Seagoville, Texas, a place known for its quiet, peaceful neighborhoods where people wave at each other as they pass by and kids ride bikes down tree-lined streets. But on this day, tragedy struck in a way that no one could have imagined. While the world was celebrating love and birthdays on social media, 27-year-old Lyric Bacchus, a successful entrepreneur with a thriving online clothing business, was about to experience her last birthday. She had over 66,000 Instagram followers, a business empire, and a 7-year-old son, Deuce, who was her world. But by morning, her life and that of her son would be cut short in a way no one saw coming. Imagine waking up to find that someone you followed, someone you admired for their authenticity, their positivity, and their entrepreneurial spirit, is no longer with us. What happened? How could someone so full of life, someone with a bright future ahead, simply vanish in the blink of an eye? This is the story of how a mother and her child lost their lives on what should have been a day of celebration, and how it took the combined efforts of a community to start unraveling a deadly mystery. Before we dive deeper into this heartbreaking case, I want to know where you're watching from. Drop your city in the comments, because this tragic event is a reminder that danger can be closer than we think. It might not be a dangerous person lurking in the shadows, but sometimes it's the dangers we can't see that are the deadliest. Stick with us through the end of this video. You don't want to miss what happens next. Lyric Leandria Bacchus wasn't just another influencer. She wasn't a faceless social media personality posting affiliate links to random products. Lyric was the real deal. Born on February 9, 1996, in Dallas, Texas, she worked hard to build a brand that reflected who she was: genuine, hardworking, and passionate about empowering others. Her clothing boutique, known as Lyric Boutique, was not just a business, it was a community. From the outside, Lyric seemed like someone who had it all: a growing business, a strong following, and a perfect little family. She had learned how to blend her passion for fashion with her business savvy, creating something that resonated with her audience. She wasn't just selling clothes, she was selling confidence, identity, and a sense of belonging. Her Instagram handle wasn't just a name, it was a brand. Followers didn't just buy clothes from her, they bought into her vision, her authenticity. Lyric had cracked the code that many influencers never get right. She was real. She didn't hide behind filters or false promises. Every post, every story, every interaction was grounded in who she truly was. It wasn't just about the business, it was about connecting with her community on a personal level. Lyric's followers loved her for being unapologetically herself. She showed them her highs, her lows, her motherhood, and her hustle, and she did it with a level of honesty that made her stand out in the oversaturated world of influencers. But above all, she remained true to her roots. Despite her success, Lyric never lost sight of who she was or where she came from. But Lyric wasn't just a businesswoman, she was a mother. Deuce, her 7-year-old son, was the light of her life. He was her constant companion, her adventure buddy, and the reason behind everything she did. Their bond was unbreakable, and Lyric's social media accounts were filled with moments of joy, love, and the everyday adventures of motherhood. Before we go any further, drop your city in the comments. I want to see where my true crime family is watching from, because what happened to Lyric and Deuce could be lurking in any home, anywhere. Stay with me, because what we're about to uncover could save your life. Neighbors described Deuce as a bright, energetic child with an infectious smile. He was the kind of kid who made friends everywhere he went and left a lasting impression on anyone he met. He had a playful spirit that reminded people of the innocence and beauty of childhood. Lyric's relationship with Deuce wasn't performative. It wasn't about showcasing the perfect life for likes. It was about sharing the reality of motherhood, the struggles, the joys, and everything in between. Her followers didn't just see a mother and child, they saw a team, a duo navigating the world together. Lyric had figured out how to balance her business and her role as a mother, giving each the attention it deserved without compromising the other. As her birthday approached, there was no doubt that Deuce would be there by her side, celebrating another year of life, love, and success. But no one could have predicted the devastating turn their lives would take on that fateful morning. February 9, 2024, was supposed to be a day of celebration for Lyric. Her 28th birthday was meant to be filled with love, laughter, and shared moments with Deuce. As an influencer, she often shared personal moments with her followers, and everyone expected the usual birthday posts, a few behind-the-scenes shots, some candid videos, maybe even a special message from Deuce wishing his mom a happy birthday. But the silence that followed her birthday was deafening. Lyric, who had been known for her constant online presence, suddenly disappeared from social media. Her followers began to notice the absence, and the concern started to grow. No birthday posts, no heartfelt messages, no updates on her business. Nothing. Family members tried to reach her, but they couldn't get through. Her phone went unanswered. Lyric, the woman who had built an empire by being present and accessible, was unreachable. Something was terribly wrong, and it wasn't like her to be silent. By the time they arrived at her home in Segoville, the worst had already happened. Lyric and Deuce were found unresponsive in their garage. The scene was eerily quiet, no signs of struggle, no signs of violence, just two bodies, lying in the same place where they should have been safe. No one could understand how this had happened. Lyric's followers were in shock. It was so unlike her to go quiet, especially on such an important day. Her business, her passion, and her relationships were the heart of everything she did. And yet here she was, missing from her own life, the life she'd shared so openly with so many. Her community began to fear the worst, and it wouldn't be long before their worst fears became a reality. Neighbors in Segoville were starting to notice the strange silence too. It wasn't just that Lyric had gone dark on social media. It was the fact that she was a part of the neighborhood fabric, a face that was always there with a smile or a wave. But that day no one saw her. No one heard from her. A mother and her son, gone in an instant. There were no obvious signs of foul play, no broken windows, no forced entry. Just an unsettling calm that didn't belong in the middle of this small Texas town. When the family couldn't get in touch, they went to the house, and it was there, in that garage, that they discovered the unimaginable. Lyric and Deuce, so full of life just hours before, were found dead. No marks, no wounds, no indication that anything had gone wrong. The garage, once a place for their cars and life's little conveniences, had become the scene of an eerie tragedy. The first responders arrived swiftly, but it was too late. The two were already gone. The community was in disbelief. They couldn't process what they were seeing. It was supposed to be a day of celebration, but now it was a day of mourning, a day that would haunt the town for years to come. How could something like this happen? Lyric's followers, her friends, her neighbors, no one could understand what had happened to her. How had a simple birthday celebration turned into such a nightmare? As the investigation began, investigators were stumped. The cause of death wasn't immediately clear. There were no obvious signs of trauma or violence. The place had no signs of break-ins or struggle. It wasn't a robbery. There were no stolen items, nothing broken, nothing disturbed, just the bodies of a mother and son who had somehow breathed their last in the place they should have been safest. The questions were piling up fast. What caused their deaths? How could something so peaceful turn into something so deadly? Theories started circulating. Was it something more sinister? Could there have been foul play that no one had noticed? Was there some kind of invisible killer that had silently crept into their home? The family was devastated, and they needed answers. And while the police worked around the clock to uncover what happened, the community was left to grapple with the mystery. But as the days went on, one theory began to make more sense than the rest. A theory that no one wanted to speak aloud because it was so terrifying, so simple that it could happen to anyone. Now think about it. How many times have you taken a moment in your car, your garage, or even your home without thinking about the risks? It only takes one mistake. Check your carbon monoxide detectors today. And if you haven't yet, do it right after watching this video. Your life might depend on it. The theory that Lyric and Deuce had died from carbon monoxide poisoning gained traction, particularly because of the garage setting. It wasn't a murder. It wasn't something anyone had done to them. It wasn't a terrible twist of fate in the traditional sense. It was a deadly accident, something that could easily happen to anyone, something that was preventable, yet so subtle that most people would never even think to look for it. Carbon monoxide, colorless, odorless, and silent. The silent killer that often goes undetected until it's too late. The theory suggested that after Lyric's birthday celebration, maybe she came home tired. Maybe she needed a moment to herself before diving into the bedtime routine with Deuce. Or maybe Deuce was asleep in the car, and Lyric, not wanting to disturb him, simply stayed there for a while. She might have turned on the car for heat or air conditioning, thinking nothing of it. After all, who would suspect that a moment of rest in her own car, in the safety of her garage, could become so deadly? Have you ever sat in your car in the garage just for a moment of peace or warmth? Drop a yes in the comments if you've done it, or no if you haven't. But keep watching. This information could save someone you love. What they didn't know, and what most people don't know, is that the exhaust from a car engine is pumping out carbon monoxide with every breath it takes. And in an enclosed space like a garage, that carbon monoxide builds up faster than anyone realizes. The silent poison was filling the air, and neither Lyric nor Deuce had any idea they were in danger. Carbon monoxide poisons the body by taking the place of oxygen in the blood, suffocating you from the inside. The symptoms often mimic the flu, headaches, dizziness, confusion, fatigue, symptoms that most people would ignore and chalk up to exhaustion. That's exactly what happened to Lyric and Deuce. They were likely lulled into a false sense of security. As they sat in the car with the engine running, they started feeling the effects of the carbon monoxide. They probably felt tired, maybe even a little lightheaded, but they didn't realize what was happening. As the gas slowly built up in their bloodstreams, they likely began to feel the overwhelming need to sleep. It wasn't just exhaustion, it was the poison doing its work, and eventually they both simply passed out. It was over. The gas had done its job. The horror of it all is that it didn't take long. In just a few minutes, carbon monoxide can take a life. It's fast, silent, and deadly. It's not like a fire or a robbery where you can see the danger coming. With carbon monoxide, by the time you realize something's wrong, it's usually too late. And that's what happened to Lyric and Deuce. As the investigation continued, the family was left to wonder, what could have saved them? What could have prevented this from happening? The tragedy wasn't just that they were gone. It was that it could have been avoided. If they had simply cracked a window, or if the garage door had been open, things could have turned out so differently. The story of Lyric and Deuce is heartbreaking, yes, but it's also a cautionary tale, a reminder that the dangers we don't see are sometimes the deadliest. Carbon monoxide is a killer that doesn't care about who you are, how successful you are, or how much you love your family. It's a killer that doesn't discriminate, and it's something most people don't think about until it's too late. And as the community began to mourn their loss, they couldn't help but think about how easily this could have been anyone. How many times had people sat in their cars in the garage or used a gas heater without realizing the risk? It was a wake-up call, one that no one saw coming but that could happen to any of us. As the family prepared to bury Lyric and Deuce, the grief felt by the community was palpable. It wasn't just the loss of two lives. It was the loss of a mother, a son, a friend, a neighbor, and a businesswoman who had touched so many lives in ways that no one expected. Lyric wasn't just another influencer. She was a person, a real woman who had a family, a business, a community that depended on her. And now she was gone. The heartbreak of Segoville lingered in the air. Lyric and Deuce's passing wasn't just another story that would fade into the background. It was a gut-wrenching reminder of how fragile life really is, and how something as mundane as sitting in a parked car could take everything away in the blink of an eye. As investigators delved deeper into the tragic scene, the focus shifted to the most unnerving question of all: could this happen to anyone? Could it happen to you? The community, still reeling from the shock, couldn't help but reflect on the small, everyday decisions they made. How many times had they sat in a car with the engine running, maybe checking their phone, waiting for a moment of peace before entering their home after a long day, or used their car in the garage for a quick getaway? What seemed like harmless behavior was now exposed for what it really was, a potentially deadly risk, one that many never thought twice about. The more the investigation unfolded, the more it became clear Lyric and Deuce's deaths were not just tragic, they were preventable. Lyric's family had a theory from the start, and it was one that unfortunately fit the facts better than anyone could have hoped. Carbon monoxide poisoning. It wasn't a murder, not a violent crime. It wasn't an intentional act that ended two lives. It was the result of a terrible silent threat that had crept into their home unnoticed. And as the more they learned about carbon monoxide, the more terrifying it became. This invisible gas produced by engines, heaters, and other appliances was colorless, tasteless, and odorless. It didn't announce its presence. It didn't give any warnings. It simply filled up an enclosed space, slowly poisoning its inhabitants without them ever realizing what was happening. The horrifying truth is that carbon monoxide poisoning is an accident waiting to happen in countless homes across the country, often in places where we should feel the safest. Every day, thousands of people use gas-powered appliances and vehicles without a second thought, unaware that the same devices could be the very thing that could end their lives. The garage where Lyric's car had been running was the perfect environment for carbon monoxide to build up. It was a small, closed-off space where the exhaust from the engine had nowhere to escape. What started as a moment of convenience, an effort to relax and decompress, turned deadly when the car was left running too long. The gas seeped into the air, and soon it was too late for Lyric and Deuce. Their story, while tragic, became a warning, one that echoed far beyond Segoville, reaching families everywhere. Once the cause of death was confirmed, the reality of the situation set in. How many of us had done the same thing? How many people had sat in their cars in the garage without a second thought, maybe to take a break or to keep warm during the winter months? The scariest part of this entire tragedy wasn't just that it could happen, it was that it does happen. Every year, hundreds of people die from carbon monoxide poisoning, and many more are hospitalized, some of them never fully recovering from the effects. Yet it remains a hidden killer, one that doesn't get the attention it deserves. For the residents of Segoville, this was a wake-up call. The reality that something so preventable could take 2 lives so suddenly was terrifying. No one had ever expected it to happen to someone like Lyric, a young woman with a future ahead of her, a business, a son. She wasn't some cautionary tale, some reckless person making bad decisions. She was a mother trying to find a moment of peace, a successful entrepreneur balancing the demands of her business and her life. It wasn't about recklessness, it was about being unaware of the very real dangers around us. It was about the things we take for granted, the everyday moments we think are harmless, that can in an instant turn deadly. But for Lyric's followers, the lesson wasn't just about carbon monoxide, it was about remembering what really matters in life. Lyric had built her following on authenticity. She didn't just sell products, she sold herself, her journey, her real life. And for her followers, the impact was personal. They didn't just lose a businesswoman, they lost a role model, someone who had shown them the value of working hard, of being true to oneself, and of staying connected to the people around you. Lyric's Instagram was more than just a business, it was a window into her world, a world that she shared with her followers openly. She didn't hide behind the polished images that so many influencers did. She let them see the good and the bad, the highs and the lows, and that connection is what made her loss so devastating. Her followers began to mourn her, not just as a social media personality, but as a friend. The online memorials began to pour in, filled with messages of grief, but also gratitude. Gratitude for the moments Lyric had shared, for the lessons she had taught, and for the way she had touched lives. It was the kind of tribute that could only come from people who felt they knew her personally, even if they had never met in real life. But not everyone was kind. As the story of her death spread, some users began to question what had happened. They started picking apart her life, speculating about whether she had been irresponsible or careless. The judgment was swift and harsh, as it often is in the court of public opinion. People who had never met her suddenly felt qualified to criticize her actions in her final moments, dissecting every post, every piece of content for signs of something they could blame. This was one of the ugliest parts of the tragedy. While Lyric's family and friends were still in the process of grieving, there were those who sought to find fault in her actions. They wanted answers, and they wanted to assign blame. Because sometimes, it's easier to blame the victim than accept that tragedy can strike without warning, without reason. But for those who truly knew Lyric, the only thing that mattered was remembering her for who she truly was, a mother, a friend, a businesswoman, and a bright soul who never imagined that a simple mistake would lead to such an unimaginable loss. As the investigation continued, the forensic team worked tirelessly to confirm the exact cause of death. But the pain of the community, the pain of a mother lost and a son taken too soon, was already set in stone. No matter the outcome of the investigation, nothing could bring them back, and nothing could change the fact that Lyric and Deuce were gone. All that remained was the painful truth. It was an accident, a tragic, preventable accident. But even in the face of such devastation, there was a silver lining. The tragedy had ignited a conversation about carbon monoxide safety, something that was far too often ignored. People began to check their carbon monoxide detectors, their garages, and their safety practices. They started talking to their families about the dangers of running a car in an enclosed space, about ensuring their homes were equipped with the right safety measures. Lyric and Deuce's deaths, as painful as they were, had sparked a movement to educate people about an invisible threat that most had no idea existed. The community began to rally together, not just in mourning but in action. They vowed to remember Lyric and Deuce, to share their story so that it might save others from the same fate. It wasn't just about remembering 2 lives lost, it was about making sure that their deaths weren't in vain, that their story could be a warning, a lesson, and a catalyst for change. And as the investigation came to a close, as the community began to heal, they were left with one final thought: we cannot take our safety for granted. Every day we make decisions that we think are harmless, but sometimes they can be the difference between life and death. The loss of Lyric and Deuce was heartbreaking, but their story would live on as a reminder that we must always be vigilant, always be aware of the dangers that lurk in the most unexpected places. Because if we don't, we might end up just like them, lost in a moment, never knowing what could have been,